Okay, hope you all had a deep breath after part one there. Let's finish this bad boy. This is the other half of performance spheres. Once again, I'm just going to take you down the lineage here because I didn't develop this overnight. This has been probably the better part of 35 years in the making, and that's me paying attention the whole time and constantly scrutinizing and analyzing and questioning and going back and trying things again and trying things again. So, anyway, this is welcome to part two of performance spheres. All right, we've already talked about my initial gambit, which was to incorporate some of the tenets that I'd learned in my martial arts studies. And remember, any of you into martial arts, my martial journey has been physical, spiritual, uh, certainly emotional, but it's not just the kicking and the punching. That I, I did my share of that, as my body will attest, being in the ring for as long as I have. But now it's much more the spiritual and the emotional sense of resilience and the mental strength that I derive from it. So anyway, carrying on, the first attempt. This is when I began to get into the study of the human condition. I began to professionally look at this, and this is through the eyes of a man rather than through the eyes of a little boy. The first attempt to separate the spheres, I separated out the mental, and that came from my work in naval aviation. Um, I'm an Air Force brat. You know, my daddy was Air Force, so I grew up in an Air Force family, and then joined the United States Navy myself. So I already got the memo, and I always bought into service to my country. But the mental side was reinforced in naval aviation. They really didn't give much of a damn about your emotional state. What they didn't want was for you to have an emotional crisis when you're rolling in, or you're in the middle of the heat of a mission, and you suddenly have this mental or emotional breakdown. That's not going to work. So they try to weed and breed that out of you as best they can. So in the Navy, the mind body was absolutely embraced, and emotions were just buried to the point where this is kind of weird now, I suppose, to admit, but we're, there's no more superstitious group than naval aviators. You never went to visit someone who was in the hospital because that was bad luck. You wore your lucky flight suit, or you had your lucky gloves, or whatever. It was just a lot a lot of little rituals anyway. So mental was stressed, emotion was suppressed, and I got to tell you, I was really good at that. I was so good at suppressing my emotions, it cost me a marriage, and I didn't even see it coming, which is a little difficult for me to admit now, but we still remain friends. But I just was not there for her, and but that was what it was required to go out and what's the euphemism, to go around the world, meet interesting people, and kill them. Um, anyway, my appreciation for the emotional and the spiritual came from my first master's degree, and that was the study of counseling, psychology, and human development. And here, I was fresh out of the Navy, and I was getting my master's so I could go into practice with my father. The emotional was emphasized, and the mental side was suppressed. So here I was in this program. It was me and one other guy and 28 females, uh, which actually was pretty cool because I was single at the time. But that's another discussion. But the point I'm trying to make is that I really had no. I was ill prepared, and I had no real frame of reference for the emotional side of things. And I'd always get called on in class. Well, Tom, what do you feel? And I would say, well, I think that no. We're not interested in what you think. We're interested in what you feel. And that used to that used well, frankly, used to tick me off. And that's what I felt. I told him, I feel like I'm being picked on here. I don't feel anything. I feel hungry. Hi, is that an emotion? And eventually my smart acidness kind of gave way to where I began to appreciate it. And you'll see where this actually came from. But anyway, I initially adopted the trinity of PMES. That's physical, mental, and emotional slash spiritual. Now, that's not an original construct here, guys. I didn't come up with that. That was what was popular at the time, and we're talking about the early 1980s. So again, PMES is the physical, the anatomical, physiological body soma. The mental is the computational, analytical part of cognition, and then the emotional, spiritual were combined as one entity. And the thought at the time was that spirit is nothing more than emotion on steroids, and this is the way that it was originally portrayed. And I remember having business cards like this. I didn't have the spheres as they're shown here. And I think that's an important point to be made. Please understand these are three-dimensional. It's meant to convey the idea of spheres, like three marbles sitting next to each other and integrated to each other. Instead, I just had three circles that interlocked, and it kind of gave that original triad a little bit of substance. So anyway, my studies in exercise science and the experiences I had in my private practice began to influence my assessment of the human condition. I did a lot of work with my father with the Veterans Administration for vocational rehabilitation, did some PTSD work, did a lot of work with governmental agencies and things like this, but I also had my private practice. So the evolution developed from further studies in exercise science, and I began to separate emotional from the spiritual sphere. More of my study into Dan Millman and Carlos Castaneda and Richard Bach, and others, and of course Joseph Campbell, began to have me questioning that the spiritual sphere was far more important and was not just emotion on steroids. So I established here the quarters of P, E, M, and S: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And this is the way it was portrayed right here. And again, this is just for illustration purposes, just so that we can all be on the same page. Then an interesting turn of events here, guys. I sometimes your world gets rocked, and mine certainly did. I'm married. I've been married now for 25 years to to my amazing wife. She would have to be amazing to put up with me, but when I met her, she was a competitive bodybuilder, and she didn't drink, she didn't smoke, didn't do any of the naughty things, um, and well, I'm just going to cut to the chase. Out of the blue, breast cancer hit. Now, I use this to kind of make a point on a number of different fronts. Sometimes, I want you to listen carefully. Sometimes you can do everything right. You can play to the top of your game. You can make no mistakes, and you can still lose. Now, that doesn't make any intellectual sense, but damn it, it is the truth. And stuff can hit the fan, and it can come out of the blue. Now, breast cancer. If any of you have been touched by this, by the monster, is what we call it. Cancer doesn't just involve the patient. Cancer is an all-consuming type of thing. It sucks everybody in the periphery into it. So I began to see my wife, and this is a little bit of a soul searcher here too. And I'll kind of mea culpa here. I always thought of myself as being a courageous individual. Um, but I discovered, much to my amazement, that I was nothing but a brave person. And there's a big difference. See, I witnessed my wife go through cancer and chemo and radiation and surgeries and everything else. And I saw her exhibit courage because she went to sleep with this demon and she got up with it and she worked through it. Me, I I was footloose, fancy free, and I was a little boy. And I would put on my flight suit, and I would go out and do brave, incredibly brave things. And then I'd take my flight suit off, and I'd be a little boy again. I'd go play in my Corvette. Woohoo! So there's a big difference between being brave and being courageous. I have since learned to try to work on my being courageous, because courage takes on a lot of. It's a far more encompassing type term. Anyway, it's the emergence of SEMP. That's spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. I discovered through my work with cancer survivors, and I've done some work with cancer survivors. I've worked with Leukemia Society and American Cancer Society and the Heart Association, and all the usual designer diseases. And I trained them in the the marathons that they have undertaken. Anybody who's into running, you know about this. You see them all the time: the purple shirts and the red shirts and the yellow shirts and the green shirts, and yeah, those are all these in the name ofs kind of people running in the name of someone else. And I think that's an important point. I won't take a lot of time on this, but I think it's worthy of a mention or two. Um, I know that we're always taught to do things for ourselves. No, don't try to do it for somebody else. You're just playing someone else's game. No, well, yeah, that has meaning and merit to a point. But I found that these people, the cancer survivors, those who survive cancer, or those who lost loved ones to cancer, were the ones that I was training. And these people, for the most part, have never done anything physical. Never done anything physical. For them, physical activity was walking out and checking the mail in the mailbox. Um, anyway, here they are, and some of them 200, 300, 400 pounds, and they want to run a marathon. Now, it's interesting that the designer diseases would choose something like this because it requires commitment, certainly more commitment than sitting down, taking out your pen and your checkbook and writing $100 check and giving it and going back and living the same lifestyle. This is the call to action and gets you out of the ordinary world. It's the reason that they did it. I discovered working with these people that after all the training, and if you train for a marathon, guys, let's just call the chase here. 26.2 miles. Any of you got a marathon under your belt yet? Put the damn thing on your bucket list. I kid you not. You'd be a changed individual. Maybe that would be one of the first things you can do to leave the ordinary world. Get a taste of it. Get a little bit of the flavor of what it is and what awaits you out there. But I found that the attrition rate was extremely low. The only reason that some people dropped out was because of orthopedic injury, not pain, not discomfort, not even being hurt, but being injured to the point where they could not continue. And even they came back, and several of them completed it. I also found that the completion rate, those who actually made it, 26.2 miles. Now, for some of them, it took them 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. But they did it. But it was the spiritual side that got them through. And one of the things that they all mentioned to me, if you've ever seen this, each of the designer diseases, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean no disrespect by that. I mean, that's just what we call them, have these little plastic pin frames that you can kind of put on your lapel or put on your singlet or whatnot, and it's clear, but you put a picture in there of someone, of a loved one, maybe someone that you lost, maybe a picture of the old you prior to, and whatnot. Anyway, some of the people had vests that they would go and train in, and they had 15, 20, 30 of these people's faces all over them. And this was amazingly motivating because I know it's not supposed to be in the name of, but it was in the name of. And they would tell me repeatedly that they'd come home after a long day's work and they'd throw their keys down, put down their stuff, and just collapse in a chair. And they go, no, not today. And they would look over there at their vest with all of those people looking back at them. And they would hang their head and just shake and go, okay, that's right. It ain't about me, and it would inspire them to continue on. So anyway, this is a kind of a visual depiction. It's the spiritual within which the mental, physical, and emotional spheres exist. Okay, well, What about that technical thing, Dr. Tom? Well, yeah, I had to do it because it was just undeniable that the technical side of things, at least in our the technical side of things in exercise science, exercise physiology, kinesiology is advancing at such a rapid rate. I already told you that I had to learn everything again from my second master's to my doctoral degree, and that was just a matter of 3, 4, 5 years. And then I've had to relearn everything, unlearn, and then relearn new advances that I've had since uh, my doctoral degree in 2003. So it's the technical, emotional, mental, uh, physical, and spiritual. But this is the way it looks right now. This is the latest incarnation. So what we've got is the spiritual is that's really who you are. I know everybody talks about it. I got to know who I really am. Well, you know what, kid? There you are. Spiritual. And if you want to explain problems, they're going to exist in one of those spheres right there. So let's take them one at a time. And I won't spend a lot of time on these because it's pretty well. I just wanted to differentiate between the five. The mental, once again, is the computational analytical. It's the schematic stuff to you guys who it's concrete. It's analytical. It's your skill sets in your respective sport. It involves a knowledge and an understanding of the game as well as physics and spatial awareness. And if you want to know about spatial awareness, proprioception, you know, a gymnast has extraordinary proprioception. High divers do the same. Trampoliners do the same. Martial artists typically have extraordinary proprioception. They know where their body is at all times in three-dimensional space, and it's based upon your experience, and it continues to grow as you mature. The physical, well, we know all about that because that's the one that we're most grounded in here in the West. Well, anthropometrics, that's the length of your various limbs. Every time I give this lecture, I'm always haunted. Um, when I got into the Navy, probably the first day, we just got off the bus and got our heads shaved and everything else and stashed all of our gear. And then we went directly across the street into the aerospace lab, and they sat us in the anthropometric chair. And all they did was they sat you down in this chair, and it had lasers, and it was measuring the front of my knees, the back of my butt, the top of my head, the shoulders, the width of the size of my shoulders. I had to put my hands straight out, the length from fingertip to fingertip, and then how high I sat from the bottom of my feet to the top of my knees. And I found that inside, and all it takes is about 30 seconds. So just boom. And because of the measurements, I was NPQ'd, which is not physically qualified to fly the Tomcat. I couldn't fly the F 14 because my legs were too long. If I had to punch out, my knees, they'd have taken my knees off. So that's why you find most F-14 pilots, and of course that's not even in the inventory anymore. But most F-14 pilots are not 6 feet and above. Physiological understanding, we all speak this with a certain fluency. I'm hoping that you guys, those who are going to continue on for your master's and your doctorate, you're going to continue to know more and more and understand more and more. But keep your fingers on the pulse because remember that technical thing. We'll get to that in a minute. The system efficiency, the capacities and loading, the interplay between duration, intensity, frequency, and the mode of physical expression. Rest and recovery is a huge topic right now, and I'm hoping you're getting that in your other classes, and then nutrition. Of course, that's a huge field too. Now, the proteins that we're coming up with right now, and the understanding of mTOR it's incredible. But we wouldn't know this without the technical, which we're going to get. Let's see, technical. The technical side. Oh, baby. Okay. Um, This is the most recent, and it reflects significant technological advances in. I just here. This is just some things, guys. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. You know what's happening. If you Things have changed at such a rapid rate that the things that you learned in your first classes as a junior have changed now when you're by the time you're getting ready to graduate. They're changing that quickly. So you've got to keep your finger on the pulse. Absolutely essential in terms of training, intervals, nutrition, the diagnostic stuff that we've got going on, non-invasive scans, and the equipment itself. Look at the advances that have been made in helmet design because of concussions in football. Of course, now we've reached the point where the helmets are so good that it's encouraging people to be careless. So you see, we've kind of reached that be careful what you wish for, because now the damn thing is so uh, it is so effective that people can be stupid and get themselves hurt that way. And then, of course, in the field of rehabilitation, my God, you get an ACL injury is the one I always come back to. And, Tommy John surgeries and ACLs, and now all the stuff having to do with PRP and stem cells and IV supplementation. Good grief, it's huge. And this is a very rapidly growing field if rehabilitation. I'm not just talking about a DPT, because DPT is just going to deal with that little tiny physical stuff. I'm talking about other things that are going to come around in the field of rehab, and the hottest thing right now is going to be stem cells and PRP. So, and then spiritual, and here it is, guys. This is the mother of all spheres. Transcendental or greater than. Yeah, it offers sanctuary, and sanctuary is somewhere where you can go and recharge your batteries, and you can feel safe, and you can get stronger, and then proceed out again. Um, you might have to have this examined and strengthened before you can leave the ordinary world. And I just told you about In the Name Of, the cancer survivors and people who lost anybody to cancer. And if anybody I'm talking to, anybody here in the class has lost anyone to cancer, you already know the devastating effect, because it's not a quick thing. You're not just getting hit by a car. Cancer takes you piece at a time over a long, long time, and there's suffering that goes along with it. Um, I'm hoping that we're going to make some significant advances in this, guys, because it's really, uh, it's really a devastating disease. And finally, I just hear with the spiritual, whenever I have to talk about spiritual, I have to talk about courage, both encouragement and discouragement. And I usually associate this with people. There are people that you can go to, and sometimes people can be sanctuary. Maybe you have someone in your life, if you're so blessed, that you can go to, and you will leave stronger than when you arrived. That individual encouraged you. They gave you something. They charged you up, as opposed to the myriad people who surround all of us who discourage you. You can be around them for just a short period of time, and it's like getting beat by a 2x4. It just sucks the life out of you. Well, those are discouraging people, so just beware of that. Little exercise here. Let's see if you can diagnose this, because this is the way that, rather than all the nice symmetrical presentations, this is what I draw to illustrate where problems lie. Now, this is actually one of my patients. This was about a dozen years ago. But I'm wondering if you can understand what's going on here. He, yeah, he's retired now, but he was a football player, professional football player. Now, what do you see? What conclusions can you come to? I'll walk you through it here in just a second, and you'll begin to see how the use of these colored spheres can give people a framework within which they can understand what's going on with their athlete. Okay, well, I'll cut to the chase. Notice the Notice the smallest of the spheres is physical. Well, what's going on here? Well, he was injured. And as a matter of fact, he just came out of surgery. And it was potentially career ending. It didn't ultimately. I'll cut to the chase on that. It didn't end his career. He came back and he played and ultimately retired, with not as a result of the injury though. But here, look at that. This guy is a physical specimen too. I mean, he benches 5.5. He no problem whatsoever. But his physical right now, ooh baby, mental. Look at this. He's confused, and it's small. He doesn't know what the hell to do. What is going on here? Technical. Well, he didn't have just the best surgeons in the Southeast. He had the best surgeons on the planet to take care of him, and the whole medical team. So that's why the size of that technical, and he still has them. He is going through rehabilitation, and I'm part of that process too. Notice, if you will, this emotion. Emotion is on the outside of spiritual. Because emotion, he's beginning to doubt himself. He doesn't know if he's coming back. He's fresh out of surgery that last week. And that emotion is drifting away. But what do you see as the grounding? What do you see as the thing that's holding this whole thing together? Spiritual. He was raised by his maternal grandmother. And she made sure her boy was righteous, and he went to Sunday go to meeting, and he was a very profoundly, and still is a profoundly spiritual man. But that was the thing that was his saving grace. This was a photograph in time. 2 weeks later, it looked totally different. The emotion, what I was working on, I was getting his emotion back into the spiritual sphere. I want everything in the spiritual sphere. You got to rely upon this. Get them all, and then start pumping up that physical. I didn't do that though. His trainer and his coach were working on the physical. More specifically, his trainer, and he was beginning to see results. He began to see results very, very, very quickly, and so his mental condition improved too. So anyway, I hope that kind of serves to illustrate how I use this, because it put everybody on the same page and everybody nodded in agreement. And so it gave us a treatment plan. Okay, a couple of closing things here. Size, well, they vary as proportionality. With experience and maturation, you can work on the overlap. But understand this, the concept, the very last word there is entropy. Anybody who's into astrophysics understands entropy. Entropy is moving from order to chaos. All ordered systems, including the human body, move from order to chaos. Now, you can recapture some of the order, but it's going to require an injection of outside energy. You don't just do it on your own. So entropy is always working. A form of entropy is aging. There you go. I mean, you're not losing your skill set. It's just that your skill set is you're relying more on guile and on technique than you are pure brute strength and resilience. So, and then there's the balance, the symbiosis that part of your chore here when you're dealing with these athletes is to see if you can get the spheres to compensate for each other. That's where the symbiosis comes in. Whereas our friend a few moments ago there with the little bit of physical, that small physical in that gigantic spiritual, that spirit was indomitable, and it got him back on track. It got him back on track very, very quickly. Homeostasis, well, that's it. We all have our homeostatic balance, and we know when it's out of balance. You know when something's not right. You know when you're not feeling well. You know when you're pissed off, or when you're maybe she broke your heart, or he broke your heart, or you're embarrassed, or you did something wrong, or you forgot to do something, you a little guilt. There's all sorts of things in here, but it upsets our balance here. And again, being physiologists here, we all know about tipping points, which we know as thresholds. Everything we do in physiology is based on thresholds. And those of you who are coaches and trainers, when you're out there practicing conditioning, training, and working out, when you're doing all these things, you're not only working on the body, you're working on the thresholds. You're either lowering the threshold so if something happens more rapidly, or you're raising the threshold so that you can endure more. So that's just another way of looking at things. I told you, I'm going to try to get you to think outside of the box. And then, of course, the thresholds here in terms of what's insufficient and what's excessive, what is sufficient and what is excessive. Once again, that's the latest incarnation. Little something needs to be said about integrity. When I illustrated that latest incarnation with all of the spheres overlapping each other, that is the centeredness. And I just wanted to touch base with you. Remember, we talked about this the last lecture. In psychology, we know there are people that are centered within themselves, and they exhibit childlike qualities of wonder, enchantment, spontaneity, adventure, joy, and rapture, and all those wonderful things, that endearing qualities. And then there are people that are centered around themselves that engender childish qualities of vanity and tantrums and what we call egocentricity, non-endearing, not necessarily the things that we enjoy about children. And that's just typical attrition pattern. I will see this occasionally. Sometimes it is like that, where I get an individual who's just all over the place. Typically, if he or she is all over the place, drugs, alcohol, lawlessness, breaking rules, just being stupid, making stupid decisions and stupid choices, they're always the usual suspects. So this is typically what I see. And I put question marks in there because I didn't want you to get caught up in the purple being spiritual. No. They're just, I don't know, put a label on any one of them. But that's typically what I see when they come in, and that's the way I'll illustrate it. And then I'll lay down a plan. Okay, this one down here, the green, yeah, we're going to get that green and start putting it back together. We're going to move all the spheres towards the center here so we can at least have them touching. And then there's a couple of things just need to be said about compensations, because this is really one of the things you do, coaches, trainers, when you're engaged in practicing conditioning training and working out. That's pick 2 is what I call it. We already talked about limits and limitations in a previous lecture. Limits are physics. Can't do anything about them. Those are your limits, babe. You run out. You've reached your limit. You have no more. You're out of air. You're out of food. You're out of water. You're out of time. Limitations, on the other hand, are self-imposed. So you impose them, or your athletes are going to impose them, but you need to figure out why. Why did you leave off here? Why didn't you take it on? Why haven't you taken it on? Why haven't you gone back to revisit this? Why hasn't anybody pushed you to go do so? And I'm hoping that everybody here is reflecting on somebody in your life, someone in your life pushed you to the point where you discovered you were capable of doing more than you believed that you could. And you probably look back, you probably didn't like it at the time, but you look back on it with some fondness. And as a matter of fact, the tougher the road, the more the affection, the more the appreciation, especially if you understand it for what it was. So what are we doing during pick 2? Well, we're training to increase efficiency of the whole system. We're also training to increase economy. We're going to try to get the same result from a lesser use of time or energy, or we're going to try to get greater results from the use of the same amount of time and energy. Either way, that's increase economy. And then you train to increase possible compensation, so that when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And this is where the spirit comes in, and this is where sometimes emotion. Sometimes you just damn it, you're not going to let them win, and boom, you just dig down and takes you places where just sheer strength and physical strength alone isn't going to get you there. And then you're also training to increase the size of the tanks. In other words, how much resilience do you have? How much experience do you have? How much pain and discomfort can you tolerate? Well, just briefly here in the final slides, usefulness has been well received in my practice. I've been using it now for years, and you've seen the evolution. I've traced it through. This latest incarnation has probably been around for about the past 10 years. Provides a clear visual of the nature of the presenting problems. This is what we're going to do. This is why we're doing it, and this is what we're going to do. So the areas that we're going to be concerned with. Um, and it helps CTIs. I'm sorry, guys. We never really. These lectures are just, I hate this because I wish I were in class with you and I wish you could feed off the energy that I put out here. But it helps CTIs, and that's what I call you guys, coaches, trainers, or instructors. In some way, shape, or form, I don't give a damn what you're going to be doing, but you're going to be a coach, a trainer, or an instructor in some way, shape, or form. People are going to be coming to you cap in hand, looking for guidance, looking for mentorship, looking for advice, and they're coming to you. You better be worthy of that. So, but anyway, it helps CTIs, coaches, trainers, and instructors, athletes, families, etc., to understand the performance problems. This is what's going on, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. It provides clarity to any prescribed corrective actions. It helps me explain what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it. And then finally, just to kind of kiss goodbye here, the model has grown from the original 2 to the present 5 dimensions, 5 spheres. I've resisted to adding others. It would become too complicated. Have any of you taken the sports psychology class over in the College of Psychology or Department of Psychology? Well, if you did, I know I used to teach the class, and I do occasionally, but I don't like teaching it because all it is a bunch of theories. They don't tell you, they'll tell you how to use anything. They just tell you about, this is Veron's theory, and this is Bandura's theory, and this is Valeron's theory, and this is Smith and Jones found, and some of them are just so ridiculously complicated that they bear no resemblance to the human condition, or they're so complicated and they're so tenuous that if you introduce the human condition, the whole damn thing falls apart. So anyway, I have considered others. Others have been considered. I was thinking about environmental, but then again, that's kind of physical. Social, that's kind of emotional and mental and maybe technical. Maturation, you see. But you see, if I put all these bubbles in there, I think it's complicated enough with 5. And I wish I could go back to 4, but I really can't find a way to do so. I've considered reintroducing emotion and spiritual as one in one giant sphere, but I don't know. Well, anyway, just parting shot here, guys. The addition to the technical sphere appears to younger clients, kind of like you all, millennials and the like, because you're technically oriented. You grew up with tech. Geez, tech for us old guys, man, that's like frozen pizza in a microwave. Oh my God, can't figure that out. Even though I'm exaggerating a bit. I was in charge and controlled multi-million-dollar weapons systems at one time. But the dominance of the spiritual sphere appeals to more mature clients, and I think there's a certain symmetry to that too, and it does make sense. I think the more maturity you've got, the more that you see things with different eyes. So anyway, well, that's it, guys. That's performance spheres, and next week is the final. Can you believe that? We've made it through the entire semester, and the final is next week. So this is the way that I talk to my patients and the way that I talk to my clients. Hope that it gives you some insights, and you're welcome to go ahead and use it if you wish. So anyway, study everything we've talked about, because the final is going to be cumulative. And just go through your notes. And the final will also be very closely akin in format to the midterm. So hope you enjoyed it.